To understand why climate change is such a threat to established stability, it's important to understand the central role that water plays in our planet's weather and climate system. The fundamental threat that climate change poses relates to what hydrologists call stationarity. Stationarity is the notion that seasonal weather and long-term climate conditions fluctuate within a fixed envelope of relative certainty. Stationarity implies stability and a relatively high degree of certainty when it comes to predicting and managing the effects of weather and climates on our cities and on our agriculture. The fact that we have determined that natural phenomena fluctuate within a fixed envelope of certainty suggests, for example, that winters will only be so cold and summers so hot. Stationarity suggests that melt from winter snowpacks will always contribute roughly the same amount of water to our rivers, and that rivers will only rise so high in the spring and fall so low in the autumn. Stationarity suggests we only have to build storm sewers to a certain size because we know from history that rainstorms only last so long and only result in so much runoff. Stationarity also suggests that lightning will only strike so frequently and that tornadoes will only form in the most extreme conditions of weather that we come to know and expect. What is happening now, however, is that increased temperatures are altering the patterns of movement of water through the global hydrological cycle. This means that the statistics from the past related to how surface, subsurface, and atmospheric water will act under a variety of given circumstances are no longer reliable. Hydrologists everywhere in the world have observed that stationarity in global hydrological conditions has never really existed, and what we've actually done is establish our own idea of the range of natural climate variability we think exists in our time. And we then built our society and all the infrastructure that supports it, and all the risk assessments associated with protecting that infrastructure around that range. And over time, this mistake in itself has made us very vulnerable, and now climate change is compounding that vulnerability. By warming our climate, we have torn open the fixed envelope of certainty within which we anticipate natural phenomena to fluctuate, and in a very real way, the genie is out of the bottle, causing heat waves, droughts, and floods, and general climate pandemonium widely. We do not, as yet, have an adequate replacement for stationarity statistics. And until we find a new way of substantiating appropriate action in the absence of stationarity, risks related to weather phenomena will become increasingly difficult to predict or to price. So we see that non-stationarity is the new normal, so to speak, to which cities like Edmonton, New York, Vancouver, London, Tokyo, and Mumbai are trying to adapt. Take Toronto, for example. It has endured 4 1- and 100-year storm events in the last 20 years, and one of these storms caused $550 million worth of damage in only 2 hours. And the same thing is happening in other cities in Canada and around the world, and it's here, with the immediate prospect of more intense floods and droughts, rainfalls and snowstorms, that our climate woes could really begin. What we are seeing is that the loss of stationarity is likely to be far more costly than anyone projected. And because of our recent economic meltdown, we find ourselves in an awkward bind. Governments maintain that our fragile economic recovery cannot be sustained if we pursue climate change mitigation too rapidly, nor because of our huge public debt can we afford to adapt in any meaningful way. And the problem is that we cannot afford not to either. Extraordinary droughts followed by unprecedented flooding in places like Pakistan and Australia suggest that it's unwise to take too isolated a view of what climate change is going to do or mean in the context of hydrologic stability. In Canada, we're still thinking linearly about climate change. We still think the effects of climate change will be local, minor, and cumulative, when in fact it will not be long before climate change will be affecting everyone, everywhere, simultaneously compounding every regional economic, social, and political disparity all at once. And this problem has been deemed to be real and serious. And what we have done collectively over time is that we have, quite accidentally, unwittingly in fact, created a hydroclimatic time bomb. And this bomb has already started to tick, but we don't know how big the bomb is or where and when it will go off. So now, very quickly, we need to figure out how to carefully defuse that bomb, and the failure to do so will have geopolitical implications both for this country, for this continent, and also globally. So in order to achieve any meaningful level of sustainability within the context of so much rapid change, it may be wise for us to rethink our relationship with water. Water is the means by which we can address these other concerns. Within the current global economic narrative, however, water is seen as essential to rapidly expanding human populations that grow ever more wealthy by ignoring the requirement for equitable water allocation to all and the pressing water needs of the natural landscapes around them. And what we're beginning to realize is that we cannot continue to act in this way without risking the collapse of the very systems upon which we depend, not just for our survival, but for meaning and value in our lives. So in this regard, we face a choice. We can choose to carry on as we have and hope for a silver technological bullet that will solve the manifold array of water-related problems that we've created for ourselves. Or we can, while we still have time, create and act upon a new narrative, one in which scientific knowledge and technological sophistication are equitably balanced against broader cultural and economic values. And it's my guess that we have barely a generation to make such a transition. And this means that we have to get moving on a major ethical transformation with respect to how we regard and manage water. And the first step in the process of creating a new world water order is to dispel some of our myths. The first myth that we must examine relates to how much water we actually have and the stability of that supply. If we do not dispel the myth of limitless water abundance, we will continue to make public policy choices based on false assumptions that could have undesirable ecological, social, and political consequences in the future. In Canada, for example, we think we have all the water we will ever need, but that's simply untrue. We may have 20% of the world's total freshwater resources, but we only have 2,850 cubic kilometers, or roughly 6.5% of the world's total renewable water resources, which is to say the volume of water renewed annually by the hydrological cycle. We should also recognize that most of our water is in the north, while most Canadians live in the south within 300 kilometers of the American border. We also need to fully realize that much of the water that we have is water left on the landscape after the last ice age, and exists in the form of cold lakes and glaciers. But with warming temperatures, that water is disappearing. The stability of our water supply is now in question, and if current trends persist, there's no assurance that the water available to us today will be here for us tomorrow, even in Canada. Whether acknowledged or not, the central principle of the contemporary water ethic being practiced almost universally today is the primacy of human dominion over water resources. We're first in line. That view, however, is now being challenged. The notion that a drop of water that flows by you unused is wasted has been completely dispelled in every region of the globe. Every drop of water in any given river system is fully utilized either by people, agriculture, by nature, or in natural geophysical processes. And this has become clearly evident here in Canada, in coastal areas in British Columbia, for example, where saltwater incursion is destroying coastal aquifers, where estuaries are being destroyed because river flows have been so diminished by upstream use they can no longer hold seawater back. There are cases on our coast where communities that rely on the salmon fishery have to pump cold water from the lake bottoms to make sure that there's enough water in rivers to allow salmon to survive. They have to make sure also that that water they pump is cold enough that salmon can still spawn. And what follows from all of this is that nature can't be where we send water only after we have taken all we need for other purposes. The ethical implications of this realization are enormous. Unless we want to contribute to our own and to global ecosystem decline, our relationship to water has to become a relationship with water. So, if the world is to have a new water ethic, what should it be? Well, dozens of important principles have been brought to the fore in answering this question. For reasons of time, I will briefly propose only 3.